What is up, and welcome to another live stream and your one-stop shop to getting better at fantasy football. This is Armchair Fantasy Football, where we help you out-research your opponent. Before we go any further, I do have to shout out the merchandise and the Discord. Both links are in the description below. The merchandise, obviously not free, but very high-quality content. Well, this is high-quality content. That would be more like high-quality material. And the Discord is absolutely free. We talk fantasy 24/7. I get back to you as soon as possible. Any Dynasty trade questions you have, if you just want to talk shop, that is kind of what it is there for. Today, we are grading all AFC North teams by position. As always, we are answering your fantasy football questions along the way. Little different format today. We're going to answer those questions between teams. So we're going to go from one to another, to another, to another. And as we transition from team 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on and so forth, I guess just 4 because we're only doing one division, we'll answer your questions then. So if you throw something in there, you have something to contribute to the conversation, we will get to you. We're not ignoring you. We're just going to kind of take things a little differently so we can get through our points today. We will be answering those questions at those times. And I say we because I am not doing this alone. Allow me to introduce you to our guest, sports broadcaster, director, and close follower of the fantasy space. He is back. He was here before, got rave reviews. You asked for him, we got him. Dylan Shabilsky, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, and I'm honored to be back, and I'm really grateful to be doing this series with you. This will be a 8-stream series, which I'm really excited to do. That'll be fun.
Yeah, man, as we kind of jump in here and get ready to go through all the teams, I think it will be fun. You know, a lot of people say, like, fantasy ends as soon as the playoffs start, which there's a couple different reasons that's not true, right? You can do fantasy in the playoffs. You can do those legacy builds week by week and your points double and all that cool stuff. We're not exactly covering that, but for you people who play Dynasty or who are bored or just want to prepare for fantasy in 2024, we're breaking down positional grades, if you will. So we'll go to quarterbacks, we'll go to running backs, we'll go to wide receivers, we'll go to tight ends, we'll go to defenses. And not only are we just going to slap a grade on there, but we are going to talk about the future. So you're going to hear Dylan and I talk about free agency, different aspects like that to an extent where we're looking forward to 2024 on maybe certain teams and players on certain teams who are in good situations, who you should invest in. And make no mistake, although 3 of the 4 teams in the AFC North did make the playoffs, there will definitely be positions that you should probably be avoiding and are not in the best situations, not in the best game environments. Let us start with the Ravens. We're going to grade the Ravens, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defense. They've been on a tear this year, got the first round bye, actually have a game coming up this weekend against the Texans and CJ Stroud. Really excited to see how that plays out in general. And we'll start with the quarterback. All right, here are Dylan and I's grades. We will go through them and then go down the line. Lamar Jackson, I'm giving him an A, and I see you are as well. I'll let you kind of expand on this in a moment, Dylan, but benefit of having impact through the air, we've seen Lamar now clock a career best 3,600 passing yards, more of a run-first quarterback through the first couple years of his career, and now he goes out, throws for 3,600. The underrated aspect, I'll let you kind of talk about the versatility of his run game and everything. Underrated aspect that I love about Lamar, especially in this day and age where we're losing Hall of Famers and mediocre quarterback play is becoming more and more apparent, he takes care of the freaking football. Like 125 passing touchdowns to 45 interceptions. We have a 24-7 ratio this year. This guy does not turn the ball over. You don't have to worry about those -2 totals. And I'm really excited about him. So what else can you tell us about Lamar?
Yeah, the big points that I highlighted on Lamar is that he is that dual threat quarterback. So that rushing bonus is a huge upside, especially in the fantasy space. And then also is that this year he turned into more of that Russell Wilson build by throwing more. I was really shocked, and he even threw the ball well without Mark Andrews for half the year, which that really adds value now to not only go out there and not have your number 1 receiver or number 1 target, but to ball out while not having that number 1 target.
Well, it's interesting, right? You lose your primary weapon throughout the first few years of your career in Mark Andrews, and you have someone with this run-heavy instinct. You would think surely Lamar's going to revert back and rush. Did he do that a decent amount? Sure, but he hit that career high for passing yards. We'll go on to the running backs. Interested to see what you have to say here. This is one of the biggest disputes you and I have. So B+ for me, C for you. I think in general this team prevailed well. If we look at them from a big picture standpoint, overall, great running game. They averaged 4.9 yards per carry. Now, when you pull Lamar out of that data, 4.7, he obviously has a very positive impact getting out in the open field. Not as many design runs, more scramble drill elements for Lamar. The instability with injuries is where I guess you're probably going to get at this with this. J.K. Dobbins out for the year from the get-go. Gus Edwards, the most stable option. He was in for 17 games. Keaton Mitchell looked magical, but he only played 8 games and then tore his ACL, and that was one of the uglier injuries that I've seen this year. There's another one that will come with a later team. If you can guess it, congrats to you. We'll get to it in a moment. But yeah, in general, lots of instability, but I would say in general, we've got a very productive backfield in the Ravens. A C is not a great grade, so what do you not like about this?
Well, the productivity is very good with the backfield, and the whole reason I'm like down on the backfield is super fragile, like you highlighted. Having 2 backs go down throughout the year is not a good sign. But then also that Lamar rushing ability takes away from me wanting a Ravens running back. You have Lamar who's going to run the ball. You know that with him being that dual threat quarterback. And it just kind of takes away from that running back position.
That's fair. I mean, you could probably name on one hand the amount of people who tuck it and run the same amount or more than Lamar. Justin Fields comes to mind. Josh Allen with those cheat up the middle runs. Obviously, Jalen Hurts. And that honestly might be it. Like, Lamar's kind of in a tier of his own. So when you do look at the running backs and you look at the instability and all of a sudden we do have a healthy quarterback who's tucking it and running himself. I mean, we talk about game script all the time, right? If a team's up, they're going to run the ball. That doesn't mean they have to hand it off. They just have to run the ball to keep the clock going. So I like that point a lot. Definitely not a surefire number one primary answer in the backfield. It should have been Gus Edwards, but then again, it should have been J.K. Dobbins, and he got hurt for like the second or third time in his career, a season-ending injury from the get-go. Then it looked like it was going to be Keaton Mitchell. So if you're someone who can get away and kind of stream, week by week, go and play with the waiver wire and get your pick, I guess this is good for you, but are you going to be able to get the third Ravens running back in a row? And then you have to pray that they're actually productive because, like you said, Dylan, Lamar runs it a lot. We'll go to a very interesting category here. You're not going to see a whole lot of teams with the record that the Ravens have a D plus and a D in a certain category. But if there's a place where it's justified, I think it's here. I am giving the Ravens a D plus in their wide receiving core. There's definite improvement here. We had Hollywood Brown the first couple years of Lamar's career, and then he left the nest. But it's just Zay Flowers, 858 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. Odell was a nice surprise. He cleared 500 yards for the first time in a bit. But at the end of the day, the personnel of this offense, and this is kind of a theme with a lot of teams in the AFC North in general, it's run first. Although we have that unstable situation in the backfield, it's a lot of running. There's not a great prioritization of the receiving core, so D plus for me. What's your case for the D there?
Yeah, for the D, like you mentioned, Zay Flowers improved a lot. Not a bad option at wide receiver 1. Does that mean would I go out of my way and get him early on? No, by all means, no. The next receiver, it drops hard and it drops fast.
Yeah.
I mean, Odell's getting old and he's going to start to decline. We've already seen the decline happening, and there's just not a lot of depth at this position.
And it's like, right, you have somebody with the experience and the past success of Odell, and if you look at him on paper, you go, this is a very solid wide receiver too. But that's just it. It's the past. It is not the current. This guy's around the age of 30, and he's a couple of knee injuries in now. He had 2 in a little over 2 years, especially with the whole turf situation against the Rams, which feels like forever ago, but really it's only 2 years ago. You've got the element of surprise here, and all of a sudden, yeah, are we delightfully surprised that Odell cleared 500? Sure, but your wide receiver 2, more times than not, should have better numbers than that. So Dylan and I kind of align the same there. We go to the tight end position. We agree here. High productivity. We brought his name up a couple times already. Mark Andrews goes down. One thing we didn't expect was for Isaiah Likely to go up. We saw a little bit of Isaiah Likely towards the latter half of last year. Came in for a game or two and was a more prominent piece with Mark Andrews battling injury. Mark Andrews is getting older. These are things we have to talk about, right? Especially in Dynasty fantasy football, the longevity of a player. How realistic is it for us to rely on someone? But tight ends alone, I love the tight end room. You're not going to find a whole lot of tight end 2s on a team with the talent of Isaiah Likely. 5 touchdowns in the final 5 games of the regular season. And Lamar has relied on this tight end position a lot so far. You've got him at A- as well.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Andrews gets hurt. That doesn't stop Lamar from going to this position. It's no secret that Lamar just loves to go to tight ends. And me being a big believer in tight ends makes me high on this because if you have a quarterback that goes to the tight end, he's going to find a way to get that tight end touches.
Right. In general, we've kind of seen Lamar have that tendency. Mark Andrews goes down and he didn't really waver. He didn't shove the ball to Zay Flowers a whole lot more. And especially Isaiah Likely, and we see this a lot with tight ends, that bigger stature, they're boxing out. He utilized them in the red zone, right? 1 touchdown per game for the last 5 games. Pretty good pace to be on. You are not going to see a lot of these in this series, but it applies here. A+ on both ends for the Ravens defense. Let's sit in and justify it. They were tied for defense number 1 in fantasy this season. When you look at a points per game perspective with the standard, it goes down as you give up more points. You get 2 points per turnover, 1 point per sack. The Ravens were all over it, and they forced the most turnovers in the league in 31. I've got an A+. What do you like about him?
Yeah, you hit it right on the nose with the fantasy. Tied for the most fantasy points from a defense. And then looking at it outside of a fantasy perspective, led the league by allowing only 16.5 points per game, the lowest amount of points allowed by any team.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that's just dominant, and the quickest way to lose points in fantasy is obviously touchdowns, but in general, scoring. If you're giving up a ton of points, obviously that's going to drop a lot, and you need the turnovers to make up for it. We get the best of both worlds with this Ravens team. They're forcing the most turnovers, and they're allowing the least amount of points. Kind of a no-brainer. And this Ravens team in general, there's just a ton to like. Again, we have the weak spot at the wide receiver spot, but that's just not how they operate. They run the ball a lot. They utilize their tight ends both in blocking situations and, of course, in the run as well, and just in the receiving end. But the defense is what this team hangs their hat on, and if there's somebody you can hold on to for an entire year, if there's a defense I would vouch you even draft in the second or third to last round, because some people leave those out and they just stream them. This team's worth it. The future's bright. Not a lot of contract issues going forward. They're young, especially on the defensive end of the ball. I like them a lot. I think there's a lot to look forward to with this Ravens squad. All right, so now we move on from the Ravens to a team that's gritty. You can kind of describe the entire AFC North in that regard. The Browns are gritty. Everything that happened to this team says they shouldn't make the playoffs. Nick Chubb goes down a couple weeks in. Deshaun Watson goes down. You go through DTR. You're trying different quarterback options. Then you land on Joe Flacco. And oh, guess what? We know he's not a long-term option. I won't step too much on the toes of this quarterback segment that we'll go into. But he turns the ball over a ton. And we've got issues. There's a lot to break down here. And we will start with the ever so complicated situation of the quarterback. I'm not a big fan. Dylan is a borderline hater. I don't even think it's borderline. He hates this going forward. There's not a lot to like in Cleveland when you talk about the quarterback situation. I'll start with the numbers and not the stats, but money. What a disaster they have going on with Deshaun Watson right now. There are going to be people out there who go, well, look what Joe Flacco did the last month and a half. It's a no-brainer. Why would you not go with him? I can give you 92 million reasons why you would not go with him. $92 million is the base salary without incentives. That is the minimum amount of money that Deshaun Watson will make in the next 2 years. $46 million a year. The Flacco run was fun, but he threw those 8 picks in 5 games. And in my opinion, long term, we have to sit with the fact that the Browns have one answer and one answer only for the next few years, and it's the guy they paid a ton of money to. What do you got on this? You don't seem like a big fan.
Yeah, just the instability at the position. Like, Flacco was fine, but he's not a viable fantasy option. He is a viable quarterback. I think he proved that, but he's not a viable fantasy option by any means. And like Watson just looked awful early on. And I'll be honest, this is my hot take. I don't think he's the guy in Cleveland. I think they really screwed up by not only giving him a full guaranteed contract, but also a long-term contract, because now you're stuck with him. They're in this chokehold right now where they can't really move a quarterback, but they should, because I don't think he's the option here.
And they're financially tied down. So they have this huge commitment. And I completely agree with what you said. Like, all of a sudden, you look at his performance the last couple of years. You look at the fact he's putting up some of the worst numbers of his career. You look at the fact they've committed so much money to this dude. And, yeah, he might have to be the answer in terms of who they're putting on the field. But fantasy-wise, as you can see, by my rating and Dylan's rating, you should not have to invest in this guy. You are not financially tied to him, nor should you be. We'll go to the running backs, as is usually the case with teams like this, where they don't have the best quarterback play, but somehow they make the playoffs. The run game's got to be good. I've got B+. Nick Chubb is legendary. Over 5 yards per carry in his career. He's had a year with over 6 yards per carry. Almost every year he's gone over 1,000 yards. I'm scared of that injury. That is the only reason I'm not where you are right now, and I'm sure you'll bring it up a bit. It's one of the ugliest injuries I've seen, and I would put it second behind the injury he had at Georgia, where he hurt, I believe, the same leg, and it looked just as ugly. I've got B+. Jerome Ford held his own. I'm worried at this stage of his career, so I'm down to like an 8.5 in terms of my confidence level.
Yeah, I'm at an A- here just because Nick Chubb's a baller, and if you have a baller, they're going to find a way to get on the field. He's a really good yard per carry option. I just hope that the injury doesn't devalue him a ton, because with a scary injury like that, you're going to find a way to devalue someone. And like you mentioned, Ford looked good with the added role he needed to take on. I thought he filled in perfectly. And Kareem Hunt is still there, and he's a solid receiving back, a really good complement to Chubb and Ford's style of running, that ground and pound running game. So I think that all three options here would be viable fantasy options if you're in a deeper league and you need a running back and Ford is there. Maybe bench him because of Chubb's injury history. Then you can have a solid back if Chubb goes down again. And I just think Kareem Hunt is going to get his touches.
I kind of like the backup plan there. Like, look, we don't want to bank on a Nick Chubb injury, but we've seen a couple ugly ones over the first few years of his career. One before he went professional and one this past year. Maybe, just maybe, because of what we saw out of Jerome Ford, we can have him in our back pocket in those dynasty leagues, in those, deeper leagues, super flex, where we have an expanded bench as well. I like that a lot. We'll go to a not so strong section, but this team still gets by. Wide receivers for the Browns, I've got C+. Amari Cooper had a monster, franchise record-setting performance. He went well over 200 yards, won a lot of people their fantasy leagues because of it, because it was in their postseason. But kind of similar to other teams we talked about, like the Ravens, for example, sharp drop-off from Amari Cooper to your wide receiver, too. It's supposed to be Elijah Moore. Injuries throughout. We've got Donovan Peoples-Jones. We've got Marquise Goodwin, who's up there in age as well, former Olympian, pretty cool. But in general, in terms of productivity, there's a huge drop-off here. Amari Cooper is shouldering the load. Take him out of here and put someone else in there who's not a 1,000-yard wide receiver. This could be a D or an F. Yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, Amari Cooper balled out. No change in production from him while there was a change at the helm of the quarterback position. He played amazing. And like you mentioned, that drop-off, did anyone forget that Elijah Moore wanted out of New York, where he was arguably a rising talent, and now he's kind of just lost in the shuffle? I think Peoples-Jones is a better option than Elijah Moore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not in the best situation either, right? He converts from one place where the quarterback play is not great, and he goes to the Browns, and when he leaves the Jets, they get a future Hall of Famer who ironically gets his number 8, and gets hurt anyway. I mean, the ship kind of sinks over in New York. Yeah, definitely a sharp drop-off. I'd be interested to see, because Donovan Peoples-Jones at the tail end of 2022 goes on this crazy run down the stretch. Looks pretty good, has some production. We will move on to the tight end position, and pretty nice surprise. Not out of left field. David Njoku is who we're mainly going to be talking about here. 6th in the league in tight end receiving yards. Harrison Bryant, another 3 touchdowns to his name. This is another team that, again, ground and pound, likes to get downhill, will utilize their tight ends not just in blocking situations, but also in rollouts. They're good receivers. Njoku really caught fire down the stretch. And you've got A-, so we pretty much align in the same spot.
Yeah, the only reason I've got just a grade below her is because while Njoku played amazing down the stretch, the only reason his production increased was with Flacco. If you look at his numbers early on in the year, they're not as good as when Flacco took over. And Watson doesn't typically like to go to tight ends. So that's my hesitation to giving them an A. And the same is said for Harrison Bryant, the production value when Flacco's on the field compared to Deshaun Watson.
So that's fair. You're kind of taking a long-term approach, which we should be doing. We should be looking forward. We know where the money is. It's going into Watson. He will likely, barring any health concerns, be out there. Maybe he doesn't target the tight end position as much, and all of a sudden, Njoku, instead of getting in the high 800s, maybe fluctuates back down to like 600, 700, which by all means, for the tight end market, specifically because we know Travis Kelce's getting older, George Kittle's getting older, other names are getting older, it's not a bad place to be. It's just not that firm A. I like that. We'll go to the defense. Definitely a strength here. I've got A. You've got B+. Third in fantasy points this season on that like standard scale where you're, again, going over the scoring. More a team scores, you go down 2 points for interceptions, fumbles, and then you get, of course, a point for each sack. And this team will rack up a lot of those when they have somebody like Myles Garrett, an absolute beast, 88.5 sacks in his career, 14 this season. A lot to like about him. And we talked about the run game shouldering the load and being one of the main reasons, along with the little magical Joe Flacco run, that this team went into the playoffs. I think the defense has a lot to do with it, too. What do you have on them?
Yeah, the defense, Myles Garrett is going to get you sacks, and the secondary is not bad at all means. Plus, that secondary not being horrible, and the receiving division, like as a whole, is not very good in the AFC North, so I'm kind of inclined to go with the Browns just because their secondary is stronger than most receiving cores in this division. And they play each other twice, so it adds value in that sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as we look at this report card, I think this describes the Browns pretty well. There is no place other than quarterback where you can really call them a disaster. There's a lot of respectable areas. And of course, the grit and the grime, when you say those two G words in football, you're thinking of running the ball downhill and you're thinking of defense. That's where they excel. And of course, being a tight end is involved with the first aspect of that, with your blocking and with kind of being that first option for somebody like Flacco, but maybe not Watson going forward. In general, that's what we think of the Browns. That's what we have them, top to bottom, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense. Good team overall. Your main concern is the center of your franchise, the quarterback. Good luck, Cleveland. So we will go to the comments. We've got Kyle Davis in here. Appreciate you, man. Kind of commenting on the Browns in general. He said, the fact that they had solid QB play throughout the year, I would go C+. Interesting, right? Because you look at the overall stats, the touchdown interception ratio, and then you also get just the sheer volume out of yards that you got from Flacco. And if you could combine Flacco with early season Deshaun Watson, and then the DTR run they had there, maybe you have a case to say you've got a decent quarterback play. So I like that. Kyle also saying, running back definitely earns a strong B from me, considering you go from a top-tier running back in Jerome Ford, and you barely missed a beat. This just kind of brings up something I want to go on a little tangent for here, Dylan, and I'm curious what your take is on it. One of my coworkers said it earlier this week. Is running back the most replaceable position? Because I feel like a lot of times we have a Nick Chubb going down or we have someone getting split carries like the Green Bay Packers situation, and someone else fills in, Zamir White, perfect example, and they just do their job. Do you think running back's the most replaceable position, or is there another candidate out there?
I would argue that receiver is pretty replaceable as well. But in terms of changeover, we see a ton of changeover at the running back position. And that makes me inclined to say yes. And it's very shocking because you have running backs like Derrick Henry, and then you have running backs like Joe Mixon.
Right.
Two complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But yet Tennessee is so inclined to get rid of King Henry when I thought Henry had a really good year.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sounds like he wants a different situation, but it's also he's getting older, knocking on the door of 30. Interesting you bring up the fact that there are two different types of backs. You have your finesse, your receiving back. We can keep reverting back to the Packers for this. Your Aaron Jones. And then you have your short yardage situation where you're just going to try and punch it in, and that's your A.J. Dillon, your brute force, someone who's taking more contact. So thanks for that, Kyle. Kyle also saying wide receiver, so kind of just went down the line with us here, which I appreciate. Wide receiver overall disappointed. Amari Cooper showed out a couple weeks, but altogether it wasn't strong. Gives it a C. Amari Cooper, again, just like put the team on his back. If you're talking about receiving production, that was Joe Flacco's favorite target along with David Njoku. Those guys were really embraced, and I think the passing offense was better with Flacco. But in general, beyond Amari Cooper, you have this what feels like untapped potential with DPJ. And then you have another inkling of untapped potential with Elijah Moore, who I feel like is just being tossed around the league like a rag doll. I hate to disrespect these two franchises, but could you think of a worse scenario than to get drafted by the Jets and they go, all right, that's not going to work. We'll send you to the Browns. Those are two franchises that do not know a whole lot about winning. So, Browns had a good season. Jets hopefully will recover with A-Rod back. So, yeah, good take there. I had it around to C, of course. And then Kyle also saying tight end, giving a massive A to Njoku. Had a huge breakout season and deserves all the praise for the offense keeping afloat. Yeah, he and Cooper, right? I mean, Njoku looks good. Bryant, not the worst. Backup tight end option, didn't have a whole lot of time to shine. And then defense, sole reason for winning a lot of those games. I was close to an A+, Dylan, and then CJ Stroud shredded them. So, I don't know, did that have any factor in kind of how you looked at them, in essence?
For me, looking at it, no,
Okay.
because I'm more of a regular season fantasy player, so I was taking the fact of
Big picture, right?
going into next season,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
That's fair. I think just seeing a rookie quarterback shred a team, to me, had me a little concerned going forward, going, okay, there are clearly holes here. They were the best passing defense throughout the year until the tail end there, and I believe the Jets took the title. But we've got that for sure. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what your Cowboys defense is then.
Yeah, right. That's a good point.
If you're bringing up the rookie quarterback argument, I would argue that Jordan Love was a rookie this year.
Yeah, first-year starter. If we're going solely on postseason, like that impacted a little bit. It took me a tick down. If we're going solely postseason, that was an F-, bro. That was horrible. Like, obviously the 2 picks, 1 pick 6, the other one almost was with Jair going down and then contact was made. That was interesting to watch, I'm sure, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. We are halfway through the AFC North. We will go to our next team. Now we're analyzing the Steelers, top to bottom, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense. Another team in the AFC North that scraped their way into the playoffs, fell 31-17 to the Bills. The Steelers, in my opinion, Dylan, are the AFC North in a nutshell. It's a team that's going to find a way to win, went 10-7 this year, but they're not going to do it in a very exciting fashion. They're not going to jump off the page. That's kind of reflected in fantasy. Let's jump into their position grades, and let's start with the glory, the center of it all, the quarterback position. We are not big fans of what they have going on in Pittsburgh right now, and I don't think many would be. My notes for this, instability at the position. I would expect this team to draft somebody else going forward. Would kind of hope they do. They are at ground zero. There was an inkling of hope towards the end, and I'll let you touch on that. There's a reason these guys are not an F.
Yeah, and that's, like you mentioned, the quarterback just rough, and it has been for the last couple of seasons.
Yeah.
However, that glimmer of hope that we both saw was Mason Rudolph, but is he a starter? And if Steelers don't draft a quarterback in the first round, I see Rudolph starting next year unless they want to go out and get this other quarterback who I think they very well could, Kirk Cousins, because I think Kirk Cousins on that Steelers team would enhance the receiving core, and I think they'd be contenders to win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins.
I was not expecting you to bring that up. That's good to know because obviously he can be free beyond this year, and if the Steelers are going to go after him, they do have the freedom to do so. I would argue, on paper, yes, you have the best receiver in the game in Justin Jefferson when healthy on the Vikings, but if you look at these two teams on paper and take Kirk off of them, which essentially Kirk was off of both of them the last few weeks after the injury, way better supporting cast in Pittsburgh. Don't know what's going to happen with Mike Tomlin. Someone brought up his contract and that he has 1 year left, and he quite literally booked it out of the press conference. So I'm not sure if Mike Tomlin's going to be there, but we can hang our hats on the rest of this team, and I'm not going to spoil too much, but I can promise you folks this, beyond the quarterback, it gets a lot better. The running game is one of those main elements. I've got A- still, and you've got B+. I would argue top 3, 1-2 punch out of the backfield in Najee Harris, the bruiser, and Jalen Warren. We'll call him the finesse back, the pass catcher, the receiver, if you will. Out of the two, Warren, 5.3 yards per carry, much more usage in his sophomore year compared to his freshman year. A lot to like there. Najee Harris, I ripped on him a lot at first, And then I realized what they were doing. Again, they're going to use him in those short yardage situations. In the cold weather, that's when you're going to use somebody like that, where he's heavier and it hurts a heck of a lot more to take contact from Harris than it does Warren. Both hard runners. This is a lethal combo. So I've got A-. What do you have for them?
Yeah, I'm at a B plus, and the only reason I'm a tick down is just because the start of the season, Najee was utilized the wrong way,
Matt
and
Canada. Yep,
he
that's
was
fair.
he was used as that every down back for the most part, which it wasn't the right role for him. I think as the season matured, I believe he stepped into a better role. I think that offense and Mike Tomlin seeing that every down back was not viable, and they switched it up, which really boosted this grade up for me. And then like the utilization from both backs at the end of the year was just fantastic.
Yep.
Great work of complementary running back usage right there.
And it's interesting you bring up the beginning of the season, because if we're doing a summary of 2023, I will agree. Abysmal at the beginning, and there were people like me going, why is Jaylen Warren not your starter? And then you start to realize, especially after the firing of Matt Canada, where they looked a lot better on offense down the stretch, yeah, these are two different types of backs, and they need to be treated like so. I don't want to see Jaylen Warren in a dog pile on 4th and inches with the game on the line. But I also don't want to see Najee Harris with a spread out attack on 1st and 10 getting me 2 yards because he doesn't have the breakaway speed. So I like it a lot, actually. You taking the angle that the play calling, a little suspicious at the beginning, a little suspect, but in general, they kind of got through it. The talent definitely there. I think that grade goes up as long as they are used properly in 2024. Both of these guys hovered within the top 20 in standard PPR throughout the year. And there are not many backfields you can make that claim for. A lot to be excited about in the backfield of Pittsburgh. Wide receiver feels like the fountain of untapped potential. You have, in my opinion, so much talent here. And you and I are kind of sitting in the same spot here, both at C+, down the middle. Not long ago, where Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, before he didn't play a whole lot of football and did a whole lot of talking, and George Pickens shared this core. I think this is like B+, A- potential if these guys stay healthy, and if, as we revert to categories before, the quarterback play is optimal. There's a lot holding this back. Johnson had seen very high target numbers in the 140s, so averaging, even before we converted to a 17-game season, about 9 targets a game, which is insane. 1,000-yard receiver potential easily. But the issue, catch percentage. What is that metric from? Poor quarterback play. You don't realize how great and manageable Big Ben was until he leaves and you got to scramble, right? Then you realize Kenny Pickett wasn't the answer. I'll end with this. The issue, the focus of this offense, because it's where they're strongest, the run. They have been sticking with Najee and Jaylen Warren, and once they realize that they don't have a conclusive answer at quarterback, they stuck to the run, and as a result, you're not going to see George Pickens or Deontay Johnson get too involved. What do you have for this category?
Yeah, I would say that the C+ is looking on the future more than what they did this year, because the future of this receiving core is super interesting, because I thought Pickens played well enough to be a late round pick. And I also thought Johnson kept his role just being very right down the middle. You know what you're going to get out of him. But the thing right now is I think George Pickens would be an amazing fantasy option if the right quarterback is present. Like I alluded to earlier, if a Kirk Cousins would come to this team. And same thing, like Johnson, just a very average season from him. There's no real standouts in the receiving core, which kind of devalues that. But that also brings that value up, because if you take Pickens and Johnson, they're pretty much identical.
Mm. Right. You got the speedier option in Johnson, and then Pickens is more of like your 50-50 guy. Go up and get it. So, numbers-wise, pretty dang similar in a healthy slate and a vacuum where they both play the full season. I like that a lot. I agree you bring maybe Kirkyo in there, somebody else who's got more upside and is more established, and maybe the wide receiver play goes up. Because, I mean, yeah, you look at the depth. I would take George Pickens or Deontay Johnson in a vacuum as my wide receiver 2 any day of the week. We haven't seen either of them really elevate to that strong, consistent. Pickens had that breakout game, but consistent wide receiver 1 yet, and that's largely due to quarterback play. This is kind of a disappointing one. I thought that I'd be rating tight end a lot higher after this season. I was a big Pat Freiermuth buyer. Just wasn't healthy. Not a whole lot of depth behind him at all, really. I believe Connor Hayward was supposed to be up next. 23 receptions for 167 yards. We saw what happened with the Ravens. One guy goes down, the other one utilized heavily. 5 touchdowns in 5 games. We did not get that result with the Steelers. Can we blame it on quarterback play? Maybe. Lack of involvement, lack of scoring in general. And Pat was hurt, so you've got C- here.
Yeah, Freiermuth was out for over half the season. He adds nice production. And the drop-off, Washington was very mediocre, didn't shine when needed to. I thought he was the second tight end, Washington, but I guess you have Hayward, so it just shows that you really have no idea who is that true number 2 tight end. I don't really trust the pass catchers in this run-heavy offense, and that's said for both tight end and receiver.
And that's just it, right? We don't even know who the true... In the depth chart, I believe Washington is the second guy, but he wasn't utilized like it, right? Next man up on paper, per public record, should have been Washington, but instead it went to Connor Hayward, so... Yeah, we got an interesting situation going on there. If Freiermuth was healthy, I still don't know how well it would have been. I think that team, the tight end situation, considering the lack of depth and the lack of quarterback play, broken record here, could top out at B+. But we didn't see that, all thanks due to injury. We go to the defense. Not what we're used to seeing from Pittsburgh, but still a gritty team. TJ Watt being out down the stretch hurt the chances against the Bills. Hopefully no long-term issues there. I'm going to kind of let the postseason just bring it down half a tick, so otherwise I would have been at B+. Not forcing any turnovers out of Josh Allen is not something many could say they had on their plate. Usually teams were able to make him turn the ball over. Yes, they ran the ball a lot. They finished the season giving up 27 points per contest in their last 3 games. Minkah Fitzpatrick, proven vet back there. They've got Porter as well. But that team had a lot more holes in it than I'm used to. And looking forward, Minkah's only going to get older. I know he's not like crazy old, but we're going to need some more answers specifically on that back end. So I've got B, you've got B+.
Yeah, I guess it's just to the fact that Watt and Fitzpatrick are proven guys on the defense. They're going to get you production on that defensive end. Plus, knowing the history of the Steelers and how they draft, they love drafting defense first round. So they're probably going to go out and get another defensive guy. Is that the right move? Depends if they get a quarterback in free agency. But knowing that draft history of going defense first, and Mike Tomlin is a defensive coach, it kind of just adds value on that defense for me.
Yeah, and I guess that's just the whole question, right? Does Tomlin stay there? That really determines the future. I like your argument in that the main sources of scoring in fantasy football are your sacks and your interceptions. And you've got 2 ball hawks. One who can bring a quarterback down at a very high rate and has a great pass rush percentage, and one guy who's got a nose for the football through the air in Minkah to kind of put a lid on that defense. So I like that a lot. We look at the Steelers, just like most AFC North teams, strong defense, strong running game, lots of questions at the quarterback situation, and I would even go on the opposite end and say there's not much of a question at all that they need to find somebody else there. Maybe it's you go and get Kirk Cousins like Dylan alluded to. Maybe you go draft. That would really lift the potential of the 3rd and 4th categories, wide receiver and tight end. Lots of potential here. This team scraped into the playoffs. Imagine what they had, or what they would have had for results if they had a good signal caller. So we will move on from our Steelers and go to the final team. So we've got Kyle. Oh yeah, still talking about the defense there, and that's really a great theme with a lot of these AFC North teams. We'll go to the Bengals and grade them quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense looking forward for your Dynasty fantasy football needs. The Bengals are the only AFC North team that missed the playoffs, but make no mistake, this team is exciting on paper. There is plenty of talent here. Looking forward, we've got a lot to be excited about if, and I mean if, everybody can stay healthy. Why do I really emphasize health? Probably because the quarterback situation was real interesting this year, but it did not bring down the grade a whole lot. I've got A-. A little worried about Joe Burrow getting hurt for the 2nd time in 4 years, I believe. But Jake Browning, he filled in nicely. 2 concerns. 1, injuries with Burrow, we can now classify them as recurring. We've had 2 over a pretty short period of time. I would really get worried if he got hurt in the future. Second concern, I think Jake Browning found himself a job somewhere else. Joe Burrow's pretty young. First few years in the league, if he stays healthy, he'll have a long career there. If he does stay healthy, Browning is not going to want to sit behind him for a decade. He could go somewhere else. I don't know how soon. You've got A. We're both big fans of this situation, but you're a tick above me here.
Yeah, I love that Burrow would be back next season, and Burrow is just solid with production. We know that. But Browning, he didn't devalue that offense at all. In my eyes, if you have 2 quarterbacks that can run an offense without skipping a beat is a huge plus. And I think that it's a tell on the style of offense that the Bengals have more than who's at that quarterback position.
Right. And one thing I really did like in one of the first games for Browning, first 5 plays, I believe he was 5 for 5, and it was his second start or his first full game. I'm not sure. Some prime time, I forget who they were playing against. He goes 5 for 5 and throws for like 15 yards. What does that say to you? Screens, right? It looked ugly. It was a weird cluster of plays in that first 15 plays, the game script, if you will, that the coach puts out. But guess what happened after that? He looked real comfortable. You'd be shocked at how much a quarterback's confidence skyrockets when you give them those high percentage throw opportunities. And it was off to the races from there. Yeah, we can give credit to the play calling, but like you said, Dylan, the fact of the matter is, Joe Burrow goes down. This offense really didn't miss a beat. They finished with a good record. They just barely missed the playoffs. The main issue was health across the board in different positions that we'll go over in a second. But yeah, props to Jake Browning. I don't think, especially from what we saw this year, that you can find me 32 quarterbacks in the NFL that are better than him. I'm curious to see if he leaves the nest. That's kind of why I have the A-. If he stays there, you've got a great 1-2 punch at quarterback. Not that you need one with somebody like Burrow, but you've got a surplus of talent there. Running backs, pretty dang impressed with what we've had over the course of the last few years with someone as stable, as healthy, as consistent, as reliable. Insert reliable synonym here. This guy is middle of the road, going to give you what you want. Production out of Joe Mixon. 37 touchdowns in total in the last 3 years from Joe Mixon. More involved as a pass-catching back as of late. He's kind of evolved as we've seen the running back position see more of those like LaShawn McCoys or Alvin Kamara's or Christian McCaffrey's. He originally was kind of ground and pound and then went to that dump-off pass type of back, avoiding contact. He also gets the benefit, if we're looking at the last few years, of being on a winning team. Team's up, they're going to run the ball more, and we've seen that a lot. He doesn't jump off the page, but my favorite part about him, he's just good enough, and he doesn't get hurt. So I've got A-, you've got B+.
Yeah, Mixon is a dog. Everything you want in a running back. Can run and catch the ball. And I was struggling grading this because I'm such a huge Joe Mixon supporter and a huge fan of it.
Fair.
And you look at his numbers in the last 3 years, and they're incredible. 29 rushing touchdowns, 8 receiving touchdowns, and then 89 total yards a game. But the downside is age. Mixon is heading into age 28. They don't really use a double back feature. He's kind of like the lead back in that offense. So it's kind of like, okay, he's taking a lot of hits. He's getting older. What's going to happen in the future?
Right. There is only reason I know his backup is because he did go to Illinois, and he had like 1 or 2 nice games this year. But to your point, Dylan, we haven't seen a lot of him. Chase Brown, stud in college. Very limited sample size this year. You know, I bring up age a lot, but I didn't do it here. Good on you for recognizing Joe Mixon's been around for a while. 28 can sometimes be the twilight of somebody's career in that position. I think in order for us to feel more confident and elevate this to like an A, because we've got the tools, we've got a great supporting cast and what we're about to go over in wide receivers. We've got a great quarterback. We've got a team that wins football games, so you're going to run it in the fourth quarter. The environment's there, but the RB1 in Cincy is getting up there in age. I think we really, in 2024, need to figure out what the case is on Chase Brown. Do we have a talented fill-in guy who can replace what I think is one of the more replaceable positions? We're going to find out if it's replaceable in Cincinnati. Big shoes to fill after Joe Mixon. Wide receiver, I mean, holy cow. This is a candidate, depth-wise, the best 1, 2, three punch. That's not really a phrase, but we're going to use it here because it applies to Cincy in the league. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. As far as I'm concerned, I just named off three potential wide receiver ones if you throw them on other teams. I personally think you throw Tyler Boyd, especially with his experience, on the Ravens right now. He rivals Zay Flowers for the wide receiver one spot. And there's a limited amount of situations. You go to T. Higgins, I think he takes more jobs. You go to Jamar Chase, we're talking top 5. Chase, obviously, from wide receiver university, LSU, has got that connection with Burrow that helps. My one gripe, and it kind of goes with this whole team, the reason they didn't make the playoffs, we saw some injuries this year. So you have an A as well. Impressive wide receiving core we have on our hands here.
Yeah, it's really a solid 1 through 3 with Chase, Higgins, and Boyd. The downside is that Chase is injury prone. We've seen Boyd go down a few times. Higgins sometimes goes down. That injury devalues it just a tad. But the real reason I'm not at an A+ here is because Higgins and Boyd are both upcoming free agents, and the wide receiver room could change.
That is fair. That's an aspect we're going to bring up in these videos, folks, that free agency is a thing. We've brought up Kirk Cousins in past moments before. Spots are going to change. The team you saw evolve in front of you this year is not going to be the team next year. And in the case of the Bengals, not just because Joe Burrow is hopefully going to be healthy in the future. There is a demand there, and you've got to wonder, what is T. Higgins' agent saying right now? What is Tyler Boyd's agent saying right now about, I could ship these guys off somewhere else and they'll be the primary or secondary option. What are you going to do to make sure they stay here and succeed, especially in a place in Cincinnati where they love to throw the ball around under Zach Taylor? We'll go to the tight ends. Kind of a direct contrast. We don't really see much tight end usage here. Have nice little stretches. We were kind of joking about this before, like, who's on this team from a fantasy perspective? You have a lot of production out of the quarterbacks, whether it's Burrow or Browning. You have a lot of production out of your reliable running back. We got to think of a backup plan for Mixon. Maybe Chase Brown is somebody you want to look for in dynasty leagues. Wide receiving core, I'll put up with anybody, especially depth-wise. Tight ends, nobody with over 400 receiving yards. You hear the term streaming option, where you're going to pick somebody up every week off the waiver wire and play that game, which we're getting more and more into a market where you need to do that for tight ends as the established names are getting older and more injury prone. There's not even that here. I mean, the focus may shift with what you said before. Higgins, Boyd hitting the free agent market. But as things stand right now, I'm not messing with Cleveland tight ends. There's no need to. You've got D+. Well, yeah, what do you got on this kind of invisible position right now in Cincy?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I couldn't name the tight end off the top of my head. I had no idea who it was. And I looked it up for this, and it's Tanner Hudson and Drew Sample.
Couple nice
Drew
names
Sample,
towards the
I
end,
can,
yeah.
I remember the name Drew Sample a little bit, but those are the top guys in the depth chart, and yikes, if that's the top guys. But I wouldn't be surprised if they let Higgins and Boyd go and they go after a tight end in free agency. Otherwise, tight end may be a position you need to draft. It's just, it can only go up. It can only go up for the Bengals, right?
That is fair. And there's certain situations, right, where there's a new name. You see a Tanner Hudson, or you see a Drew Sample, for those of you who didn't recognize him when he came in the league with pretty good scouting report. And sometimes it's good to learn new names. Tucker Kraft has been pretty fantasy relevant the last few weeks, and you could even say Luke Musgrave as well. I'll bring in your examples with the Packers, right? Those are names, Isaiah Likely in Baltimore. We're going to have to learn them because when they're in there, they're being utilized. The problem in Cincinnati is these guys are in there, and they're not being utilized because of Tyler Boyd, because of Jamar Chase, because of T. Higgins. Is that going to look different in the future with those guys being free agents, Boyd and Higgins? I think that's where our hope lies. If that wide receiver depth and our grade as a result goes down, maybe the potential for tight end usage goes up. We'll have to see if Burrow does that. Burrow really likes to sling it, throw outside the numbers. This is a spread out offense. I don't know. This is kind of an invisible position. Like, Dylan and I legitimately had to do some digging to see what kind of contributions we got out of these tight ends, because there's not a whole lot of you out there who are reaching for this, unless you're in some exotic 16-team double tight end format, a 12-team standard PPR format. is not a place where you're going to hear a whole lot of people talking about the tight end play in Cincinnati. So with that, we will go to the defense. Yikes. Yeah, if there's one weak suit, this is 1B. Slightly better rating on your end. You got C-. I've got a D. The top was taken off of this defense. That's the excuse I will give them. So you have Von Bell, backside safety, gone, Panthers. And then you've got Jesse Bates off of the Falcons. So both got shipped off to the NFC South, actually. That's not the sole reason for this, but if you do look at this team as a summary of this year, those are significant losses. When you have a defense that's giving up 248 passing yards per game, that's the 5th most in the league. This team had to get in a lot of shootouts, and they're pretty dang lucky they had a compatible quarterback with a strong wide receiving core that was kind of healthy at some moments to be able to scrape out the amount of wins they had. If they didn't have that, they'd probably have a better draft pick right now. But in general, you have a team that needs to score a lot of points to win. You're not the biggest fan either, but you're giving them a little more credit than I am.
Yeah, they get a C- in my book. There's no real standouts on defense. They're just an okay group of guys, a tad below average. Basically is what I'm saying. When you think of Bengals, you don't think defense. You don't think of defense. You think of offense. They're so offensive heavy. And you're going to need that in the AFC with teams like the Bills and Kansas City. But the only issue is that they don't have a defense. And that's kind of why I'm like hesitant to put it lower, just because they can compete. They weren't bad by all means this year, but they're just not over that average mark or above average where they had a good enough record to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, you'll look at a lot of statistical categories from this year, and you'll see this team is bottom half. I do agree. The fact that they had a backup quarterback in there, some credit goes to Jake Browning for sure. But in general, this team is built to get in shootouts, and they want to win more than they lose, like any other team. That's how they play their ball. You got to put up 30 to really give yourself a legitimate shot, to put a Band-Aid on this thing and say, all right, it wasn't pretty, but we got it done. Yeah, I mean, you don't have an investment in the 2 defensive backs that left in Bates and Bell. They apparently were asking for too much. And this team in general, where have their first rounders been? Where has their money been? It's been on the offense. It's been Joe Burrow. It's been Jamar Chase. It's been keeping Higgins around, and we'll see what we have now with Boyd as well. There's not a great prioritization. And from a fantasy perspective, I have no reason to invest in a team that not only gives up a lot of points, but scores a lot of points. I want nothing to do with that defense, because now, if a team puts up 21, the problem is the Bengals are not putting up 3. The Bengals are putting up 21 or 20, and now that other offense is like, well, we're not done. We're going to put up 30, 40, 50, and that's a nightmare in fantasy. Whereas if you had a bad offense, you could make the claim that, oh, maybe the backups will come in, and, you know, this isn't the best option, but maybe this team will take their foot off the gas pedal. We have learned time and time again with the Bengals, you can't really do that. They're an offense that's going to compete. On the flip side, if you looked at a team like the Commanders with Sam Howell, horrible defense, well, we know you got to throw it a lot. This is the opposite. You don't want to mess with this defense, because the offense is going to force the other team to keep their foot on the gas pedal. Yeah, I would avoid defense. And we look at this team in general, pretty sharp drop-off. I've got 3 A's and then a pair of D's when we look at the invisible tight end play and defense. For Dylan, a couple A's, a B speckled in there, a D+, and a C. The weakness definitely in the defense. This is one I would avoid unless you're in an exotic league format. Again, 16-team, double defense. I really hope that does not exist for the sake of all of you. But if that is a thing, tight end, we want to watch, considering the wide receiver free agency situation with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So Bengals, solid team all around. They're in a tough division. The main reason they were not in injuries, and if there's a secondary reason, it's that defense that gives up way too many points. Good luck, Cincy. Invest in the defense. Otherwise, very bright future, exciting team that scores a lot of points. Jordan's in the chat. Dang, Dylan, with all that hate on the Steelers. All right, I'm curious now. What do we have here? I mean, they're not pretty, Jordan. Like, I understand they were 10-7, but this is not a fantasy-friendly team. Like, we gave them their flowers in the running back category. Dylan was very tough on the tight ends. I gave him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt of, like, the potential that could be there. Here's your chance to respond, Dylan. What do you got to say to Jordan?
Okay, so quarterback, it's kind of just a crapshoot the entire year with Pickett or Rudolph. No real answer at quarterback until the end of the year where they went with Rudolph and gave him a second chance, which I think they should have did way earlier on. Running back, I have no complaints at running back. I think that position is very solid. The receivers, again, just very average, going over again, just average. Here's my problem with tight end. Tight end, you have historically, in Pittsburgh history, some of the best tight ends to ever do it. Heath Miller comes to mind. And knowing that Pittsburgh develops good tight ends and seeing Freiermuth get injured this year, it hinders his trajectory of going up and improving. And like that's kind of my reason of taking a step back, because of the fact that he lost 8 games to injury and he can't develop in those games. The defense is going to be fine. But that tight end position is very based on developmental and reps for Freiermuth, and that's why I have it so low.
Good argument there. And I think it's good, right? Because if you look at the lackluster quarterback play, that's kind of where all of this starts. It's a domino effect. Running backs aren't affected by it. Jaylen Warren's chilling. He can get those dump-off passes. Any NFL quarterback should be able to make those. Najee Harris doesn't freaking care. The worse the quarterback play is, the more they're going to run it up the gut. But then you look at the wide receivers. Lots of potential. I said before, they have a B-plus ceiling. You got Deontay Johnson. You've got a physical specimen and monster at George Pickens. And then you look over to the tight end position and you go, I mean, what could have been? You've got someone who's injured early on in his career, and barring any major decisions like signing Kirk Cousins, like investing in a first-rounder, do we have a lot of hope for the future here? I have an injury-prone tight end with a kerfuffle of a quarterback situation right now. I don't think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. So, folks, we've gone through all 4 teams in the AFC North in this live stream. There will be videos to look back on where we are reviewing things. Now is your time as Dylan and I kind of reflect and wrap this thing up and give our final thoughts. Throw any questions, comments, concerns you have in that live chat below. Leave a like. Make sure you subscribe as well. Dylan, one thing that comes to mind as we wrap up live stream 1 of 8 that I want to cover and branch off on a little bit here before we wrap it up. Put you on the spot. I'll do it to myself as well. Out of these 4 teams and out of these 20 positions, where is the area where there is the most opportunity for growth? Like, they could rise up the most, considering free agency, considering improvement, considering injuries, considering their draft position. Out of the Bengals, Steelers, Browns, and Ravens, you got to pick one position out of those guys and say this team has the potential to really explode in 2024.
I'm going to go back on what I said earlier with Kirk Cousins to the Steelers. I think if the Steelers pursue Kirk Cousins, they get a solid B- to B+ quarterback, which enhances the running back game will stay the same. Maybe go up to a B+ or a A- in my eyes.
Right.
Receivers, I think, would be a B+ ceiling, like you said. I think tight end, we see that Kirko Chains loves TJ Hawkinson. Look at the year Hawkinson had. If you bring Kirko to Pittsburgh, I think that tight end position is going to be a solid B+, and that's a huge improvement from C-. And the defense, they're going to probably draft defense in the first round like they usually do, add another defensive piece. I can see Kirko to the Steelers improving the Steelers to be a Super Bowl contender, like I said earlier.
And we talk about that solid foundation. Again, you look at the Vikings in a vacuum, you look at the Steelers in a vacuum, and if you plug Kirk on an already 10-7 team where the quarterback play literally could not get worse. You get someone who has a few 4,000-yard seasons under his belt. You get someone who's thrown for 30 touchdowns before. I would say the second for yours, if we're going off of your theory, and then I'll give my own. Second most potential to grow based off of what you said, the wide receivers. I mean, the tools are there. The running backs aren't going to do a whole lot. I think we've got a pretty hard glass ceiling for the tight end position considering the injuries with Freiermuth, right? I'd be pretty curious to see what goes on there. All right, who do I have improving? Kind of going to go off the same logic, but not really. Let's go to Cincy. Stay in the Midwest here. We're recording out of Wisconsin. Tight ends for the Bengals. I have a very difficult time, going back to what you said, convincing anybody, including myself, that Cincinnati is going to go out there and re-sign both Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, because while they are the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3, not in that order, they are not going to be asking for wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 money. And I don't think there's a lot of teams out there outside of like teams with the cap space like the Bears or the Packers where they have the draft capital to do that, who can afford multiple wide receiver 1s come contract time. And unfortunately for them, 2 of the 3 have contract time coming up. So I'm going to go tight ends as a result. We could really see an elevation of play there. Like you said, Joe Mixon's only going to get older. So who are we going to lean on? Chase Brown, who we don't know a whole lot about yet. We'll have to see what happens in camp. We're going to lean only on Jamar Chase and whoever fills those spots. There's a lot of unknown there. Well, Drew Sample's been around for a little bit. Tanner Hudson had a nice last couple of games. I think we've got a good ceiling there. I don't know, because you see the tight end play really elevating. We don't know much about that tight end room. What we do know is they're not getting used right now. So,
Well, yeah, the fact that they're not getting used, it very well can improve. And especially with Boyd and Higgins coming on free agency, I don't see both of them re-signing. I see one of them re-signing possibly. But then are you going to go out and get a veteran receiver for your 3? Are you going to draft one? Because I think the Bengals should draft defense. So then it kind of look at it, and do you trust Drew Sample at improving a lot? I don't know. I would say that it has a really good chance of going up. Like I said, there's only up from here.
I'm curious, right? You look at the Bengals, you look at their offense, and I don't think they have a lot where you go outside of defense. Wow, we really need that. We're struggling. This is a 9-8 football team that lost their quarterback and still prevailed. I think there's a better chance of a team like the Steelers maybe trading up for their quarterback if they don't go with Kirk O'Chains. But if we look at Cincy, there's a certain guy out there named Brock Bowers who is not going to fall to them. Maybe if you're going to invest in somebody and jump for somebody and you're getting a vacancy in the receiving department because you lose Tyler Boyd and or T. Higgins, you go out and get somebody from Georgia who's supposed to be a generational talent. I don't know. Thoughts on that? Could you see Bowers and Cincy?
The thing about Bowers that is so interesting is that he is such a middle field receiver, and Burrow likes throwing to the outside. So the thing that's interesting about that is that Burrow doesn't really like to take chances on the inside, but if you would get a Bowers, you're kind of having to scrape together a new outlook on your offense and maybe throw more crossers inside. Whereas like a traditional tight end who runs outs and drag routes, that's what Burrow likes, is those short passes if it's open. Like if nothing's downfield, he's going to go to the tight end on the drag or on the out route. Whereas Bowers is a little different, where he's a very much a 50-50 receiver. He's like a standard receiving like tight end, like a Hawkinson, like a Kittle, like a Kelsey, that standard tight end that is known for pass catching. That's what Bowers is. So it'd be interesting to see that in a Bengals very outside offense where he's very middle field.
And you mentioned before, and it's good to note, Joe Burrow's primary option is outside. If you're going to trade up for somebody, you cannot be trading up for a secondary option. If you're taking a chance on someone and spending draft capital and spending picks and spending a bench player and spending something to elevate your draft capital for that round, because the Bengals almost made the playoffs. It's not like they're a lot. There is no lottery, but it's not like they're a top 10 pick. Are you really going to stretch all the way up there? So maybe that's not the best pick. So now I'll put you on the spot again, and I'll do the same thing myself because it's only fair. That's our growth. Bengals, Steelers, Browns, Ravens, one position. Out of those 4 teams, who sinks? Who do you see plateaued and could be going south from here?
Oh,
I know, it's kind of tough.
Plateaued or sinking?
I guess plateaued now, and who do you see sinking? Yep, in 2024.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to go Browns quarterback.
Okay. You can't get worse than F. So you think they're going to stay this bad? Do you think it's worse? I'll just let you talk. Yeah. What are you thinking here?
The the reason that it's so bad in my eyes is because the guaranteed money that Deshaun Watson is getting leaves very little room to improve your offense for him. He is basically going to have to work with what he has in that sense of he has Amari Cooper for how long, I don't know. He has Elijah Moore for how long? Again, I have no idea. The running back position is going to be fine. It's not going to get devalued at all. But the fact that they are such a run heavy offense and Deshaun Watson did not look like a very good quarterback and his receivers in my opinion are below average. Like they had moments, but they didn't have like Amari Cooper is only getting older is my opinion.
Right.
Like he's only getting older. And same thing with Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore I think has been stunted at growing as a receiver for the past 3 seasons now. It's just it's so hard to like think of a scenario where Deshaun Watson is going to improve based on his players because he put him in a chokehold and deadlocked him at money and capital.
That's fair. That's kind of a good argument too, because yes, you have them at F, and then Jordan will get to Jordan's got. So I threw something in the chat below, folks. Feel free to go in the live chat. We've gone over our grades again. We've got the AFC North champions of 2023-24 and the Ravens. Then we went to the Browns. Just realized we did the order of their standings. That's kind of cool. And then we ended with the Bengals there. Threw it in the chat, and feel free to comment anything that you want. I just asked who wins the AFC North next year and why. Jordan saying Ravens hands down. Jordan, I'd love to know the thinking on that. That's a loaded team in terms of talent on the defensive end, and you've got your MVP candidate for this year in Lamar Jackson. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I will go to what I was thinking now for a team that could take a dip. All right, I asked you this. I kind of got to think through this myself now. I'm between two. Jerome Ford did his job, so I'm not going to rip on the Browns' run because I do think in general, Stefanski is kind of a quarterback whisperer, and he's going to help certain things go well. They're in a bad predicament right now, so I don't want to blame him for this. Stefanski, of course, was the quarterback's coach when Case Keenum went on that magical run with the Vikings, and they needed a little luck along the way. I am going to go. I'm going to go wide receiver. I don't think they're going to fall a ton, but A is definitely top tier. And I was thinking about this earlier. I didn't mention it when we were talking about the Bengals. I don't know if you can find a better 1-2-3 punch in the league. There might be one. The Jags, if healthy. Ridley, Kirk, Zay Jones. That's pretty nasty in my opinion. And I think when contract time comes, those guys are all going to want wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 2 money. There is no way that all three of these guys are being signed and we'll be happy. Maybe there's a way, right? You tag one and then you're good. But if we are looking long-term and we are truly looking out, for those of you watching, again, feel free to comment in the live chat anything you want. Who do you think is going to fall off a cliff in terms of positions between the Bengals, Steelers, Browns, and Ravens? And who do you think is going to have the greatest improvement? We want to hear your takes as well here on Armchair Fantasy Football. I don't think there is a world, because we saw so much go well with Browning in there, and for the most part, the wide receiver core was out there, where all three of these guys stay. So I think I'm going to go wide receiver. There's also the theory that how on earth could the Ravens defense get better? I don't know. They've kind of sustained this relationship for the last few years. They're this ground and pound team that's going to hurt you on the other end and is going to make life hard for you. I'll ask you this, Dylan, since I asked the chat. Who do you have winning the North next year?
I think the Ravens is the safest pick, but I'm not about safe picks. I think the Steelers.
Ooh. Okay. Under a new QB, obviously.
Again,
Yeah.
this is my dream of Kirk Cousins going to the Steelers and Tomlin staying, drafting first round defense. You're improving not only your quarterback, but your receivers and tight ends. If you draft on defense, that defense goes up. So I will say the Steelers, in my opinion, because of my fantasy that I have in my head of what they can do.
It's definitely a well-rounded bunch, right? If you look at the Ravens and you ask where the priority is from our report card, if you will, it's definitely wide receiver. Now, they are by no means in position to go out and get Malik Neighbors. Definitely not Marvin Harrison Jr. So this is a team that would have to wait for somebody to fall later in the first round. I'm going to go Bengals. I know you like the Steelers, and there's a lot to build there. And in this kind of fever dream where Kirk Cousins does go to this offense, and I would love to see it happen, if he doesn't, and they invest, and they trade up, which I do think the Steelers and Raiders could be two teams that potentially trade up. Jimmy G experiment didn't go the greatest. Aiden O'Connell wasn't the most efficient. This is a team, at the end of the day, went 9-8 without their franchise quarterback, someone they already paid the big bucks to. The clock is ticking a little bit because we do have somebody in Joe Mixon where we have a bit of urgency there. But I look at the holes in their game. An injured quarterback, an absent tight end core, and a pretty god-awful defense compared to the rest of this division. And I go, aren't there a lot of places we could get better in? This is not a great report card, and this is a 9-8 football team. What more could have gone wrong? Jamar's out for the year. T. Higgins is out for the year. They left earlier. Joe Burrow was already down. We already had injuries throughout the wide receiving core. I think there's a lot of potential here for this team to get better and maybe win 11 or 12 games. So we've got Jordan's explanation. We've got Heather in the chat as well. Thanks for stopping in, Heather. Jordan's saying, if Joe was the Browns starter next year, I would say they have it in the bag. But like Dylan said, they have all their eggs in a basket with a hole in it. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, essentially, what Jordan's getting at is this team is not in the best situation right now. They invested a ton into somebody who is not giving them the return they're looking for. We are talking about the legend, Deshaun Watson, who is owed $92 million base salary. That's without incentives through the next 2 years. That is quite the predicament they're in. There's kind of a case for all these teams, right? Like the Ravens won it. They're looking dominant. The Steelers, solid foundation. Kirk could go there. The Browns, great defense. No clue what's going on at quarterback. And the Bengals, hurt quarterback, still went 9-8. So Heather going, Ravens all day. Hi, y'all. Y'all should call a game together. Wait, why can't I see the whole thing? Guess. Oh, guest spot on Titan TV for Corey. Oh, should I come back? We could see about that. Andy was joking about that, actually. So, yeah, maybe we'll do a little alumni special with a current student. Dylan's got a couple years left, so we could do that. That's kind of up to you guys. Me and Heather are old news, so that is up to you. So Heather's going Ravens. Jordan's going Ravens. You're going Steelers. I'm going Bengals.
I will say,
yeah,
to argue the Bengals, if you look at the defenses for the Ravens, Steelers, and Browns, I don't know if the Bengals can beat those defenses with an offense like the Bengals are going to have next year, losing 2 receivers potentially.
Right.
I don't see a world where the Bengals can do that, honestly.
That's a good point. There's a joke, Heather. We are not old news, but in general, we do have we have moved on. I'll come back and get another degree. Yeah, I do like that because all of a sudden you do have a wide receiving core that, again, we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but they can't pay the whole bunch. And, you run into some trouble with looking at this Bengals team and going, can we really feed all these mouths? I'm not too sure. That's a fair point. And then, yes, of course, facing these opposing defenses, what do we have them rated at right now? We have the Steelers, not themselves, but still the fact they're not themselves and are B and B+. Pretty impressive for the most part. We've got the Browns looking pretty dang strong. One of the best fantasy defenses out there. And then we do have the Ravens. Okay, so now we'll do the flip side as we have been doing pretty much this whole episode. We have our first finishers. You're going Steelers in the predicament that Kirk goes to Pittsburgh. I'm going Bengals. assuming that Joe Burrow can help this team grow 3 to 4 wins, who finishes last in 2024?
The problem with this division is that
Yeah.
they're so close. It's like pick one out of a hat.
Yeah,
So
it's talented.
I'm gonna go Browns
Okay.
last. I think
That's fair.
that's probably the one I will do because their quarterback situation and their capital that they have, along with since they made the playoffs, they're not gonna have the highest draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
So if they even have a pick, I don't know if they traded it to the Texans.
That's a good point. That's something to look up in the first round because obviously things are going to fly around until April.
So like that all coming together and the fact that Deshaun Watson is just he looked awful. The receivers are kind of poor play right now. It's just a very very rough situation in Cleveland.
And yeah, this is kind of a tough division to talk about because the team that finished dead last was 9-8 and is very talented and again didn't have their quarterback. I think it's interesting that you do pick the Browns because out of the teams that are having trouble quarterback wise, we can't really say the Bengals and we can't really go out there and honestly say the Ravens. You've got an MVP candidate. He could be doing it once again in Lamar Jackson. But you have a Steelers team where everything's kind of up in the air. And then you have the Browns where I think the reason you didn't say the Steelers and you said they have potential, and I like that a lot, at least the difference between these two is for the Steelers, we know for a fact they kind of control their own fate. Do they have to bring back Mason Rudolph and declare him the quarterback one? Are they paying him quarterback one money? Or could they go and draft? Or could they go and trade up? Issue with the Browns, as well as Joe Flacco played, he could have thrown in, 18 touchdowns and 0 picks for the last 6 games, and then he could have won him the freaking Super Bowl. What are you going to do about the guy that you owe $92 million to? I don't really know. And that's kind of why, yeah, you could make an argument that the Browns have the best defense here. You could make an argument that the Browns have the best tight end production here, top end wise. I will say the Ravens got something good going on with Mark Andrews, and then when he's out, and it's him with the new and Isaiah Likely, we've got a case to be made for the deepest tight end core, but if you don't have a good quarterback, you're kind of SOL. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, like I said earlier, this division it's always a crapshoot. Always. It's you have no idea with this division because it's so close. The Bengals, Steelers, Browns, Ravens. For I think most of our life that the top 3 teams were the Bengals, Browns. No, not Browns. Browns were always at the bottom.
Right.
My bad. But the Bengals, Steelers, and Ravens were always intermixed. And I remember growing up, it was always Ravens, Steelers, like the rivalry with Big Ben and Ray Lewis was huge, and Ed Reed. So the fact that those 3 teams and now the Browns are kind of catching up, but I think it's another fall off for the Browns coming up here because of that. We keep saying it, but the capital is just not there money wise, and I think their draft capital is a little lower too. It's just not there, like other teams, and like the Steelers, they barely trade away first round picks. They always hold on to their picks. They believe in drafting guys. Ravens are the same way. I think the Ravens should draft a receiver.
Yeah.
I think they've been trying to do that, but they just haven't been able to strike on gold yet. And then the Bengals always seem to do wonders in the draft. They'll probably go O-line in this next draft again. They'll probably stick another O-line when I think they should go defense. An edge would be huge for that team.
That's interesting because you're thinking about like defense and the importance of defense and what we can do to really nail down a franchise that will stop teams from scoring, and how much importance lies in that when you have a team like the Bengals who you said, are they going to be able to keep up with everybody else? I don't care how bad this defense is if they're giving up a ton of points if this offense can keep up. And unfortunately for the Bengals, their division games are against the Steelers, Browns, and Ravens. That phrase, right? Defense wins championships. If you look at our rankings today, leading off, not even rankings, but if you look at the order of where we did grades, we went Ravens, we went Browns, we went Steelers, and then we concluded with Bengals. That was the AFC North standings for 2023. That's what I just kind of noticed here. A-plus defense finished first in the AFC North. A/B+ defense finished second in the AFC North. B/B+, third in the AFC North. Guess who was dead last despite not having a quarterback? Maybe that's where the emphasis needs to be placed. Now I'll ask you this. Defense wins championships in the NFL, or is it kind of magnified because you're in the AFC North, right? You're surrounded by all this talent. Do you think defense matters more specifically in this division?
Yes. The added history that the AFC North has of just historically amazing defenses. Like when I think of defenses, you can count like the very brutal games that Vontaze Burfict was a part of on the Bengals. I say Ed Reed and Ray Lewis. You think of James Harrison and Troy Polamalu. Like there's so many legends in the game that come from this division specifically. So many defensive Hall of Famers that come from the AFC North that I think it's a cultural thing of like this division is the baddest division in the NFL, and this is the reason, because the defense is so tough. The games are gritty. Midwest teams, two teams in they're all pretty close in proximity. The Bengals, Steelers, and
Ravens.
Browns
are
Browns. All very, very close in proximity. The Ravens are kind of out there. They're in Baltimore. It's kind of a farther journey, but two teams are in Ohio. And then you have Pittsburgh, which is very close to that borderline on Ohio. So it's very, very gritty, I would say. That's the one word I would describe this division would be gritty.
That's fair. And that kind of makes you wonder, not to get too in the weeds here, but the people making these decisions, the owners who have been in their positions for a while, the GMs who have been in their positions for a while, don't have the exact numbers of how long the GMs and owners of the Bengals, Steelers, Browns, and Ravens have been around. But if this is what this franchise has been known for, and you see the other three owners and GMs kind of putting all their eggs in one basket, maybe without a hole in it, in the defense, and they want to make life hard on you, and they want to make life hard on your first-round quarterback, whether we're talking about Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson, or they want to make life really hard on your 1-2-3 punch in your wide receiving core and Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, of course, not in that order. Maybe, just maybe, all of a sudden, even though we're in a day and age where offense is definitely prioritized, maybe we just have teams that are willing to stick to old school football, and because they're so close together, so be it. I will kind of just circle around and recap what we've done so far, folks. Thank you so much for jumping in the stream. If you have, make sure you leave a like. Make sure you subscribe. I'm Corey. That's Dylan above me here. This is Armchair Fantasy Football, and we're going over the fantasy situations and really the grades of each position of each team. And yeah, we're grinding it out in the offseason. Every team in the NFL will be covered over the course of the next 2 months. We did the AFC North today, so we did your champions in the Ravens, your second place team that made the playoffs in the Browns with whatever's going on at quarterback right now. You could say the same thing about the Steelers, made the playoffs, whatever's going on at quarterback right now. At least they control their own destiny. And the Bengals, who have their mind made up at quarterback, but cannot stop a nosebleed on defense. We've got Amber in the chat saying, fun graphic. Thank you, Amber. We're trying to kind of improve the production quality here. And Andy's in the chat. Andy made his way in, says Corey and Dylan, what's up, boys? Folks, this is an interactive experience. We are here to help you in fantasy football. We're not only grading each position, but we're kind of breaking everything down contractually. We've been talking about free agency a lot today. We'll wrap this up in a few minutes, but if you have any questions, comments, concerns, throw those in the live chat. You've got priority. Dylan and I have the chat up here, and we will answer you ASAP. Got some questions in there. Which division should we cover next? You can control that. Who do you think is going to win this division? What players do you want to watch out for? And Dylan, this will be our last topic before we answer any lingering comments in the live chat. Cover NFC North next. Andy, you got dibs. We'll go to the North. We'll go north to north. That'll be fun because Dylan is a Green Bay Packers fan and I am a miserable Chicago Bears fan. Biases will hopefully be left out of it. We'll see how grading goes. That'll be very interesting. But, of course, for all of your benefit, we will break down the cold, hard facts. Let's go with this, Dylan. Give me... We'll go 2 each, just to kind of expand this a little bit, give everybody time to throw their comments in the live chat. 2 fantasy players to watch out for. Take with that information what you will. Best, most improved. Who are 2 people going into 2024, or if you are in Dynasty, who you need to go and get, whether that means trade for them, pick them up off the waivers. Who are 2 players that you would put a magnifying glass on rolling into the next season out of this division?
I think one would be Njoku.
Okay.
I think he proved himself to be a top tight end option with the Browns. Again, it's depending on that quarterback situation. If, like I said earlier, my only knock is that Flacco likes tight ends more. He's an old school quarterback, so that would be my one knock, is that Watson doesn't really utilize the tight ends as much as Flacco does. And then number 2, I would say I had him on fantasy this year. He had 2 really solid games. George Pickens.
Ooh.
I think Pickens is going to leapfrog quite a bit this year, or this coming year, based on what we saw. And if Rudolph is the starting quarterback, he had that really good game with Rudolph where he had 35 fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
It was an insane amount of fantasy points. So we'll see. Those 2 are my picks. I would say Njoku and George Pickens.
Good stuff. And those are guys that in most leagues you will have to trade for. Listening, if you're in like a picky 8-team like home style league where everybody hates the AFC North, maybe you don't have to worry about it. You're probably gonna have to fork over some picks. It won't be anything crazy. Maybe you fork over a couple bench players, but we will do that. So, folks, we're going over 2 players each who you should watch out for going into 2024. If you have any questions about the Ravens, Browns, Steelers, Bengals, pop those in the chat. I will give mine now. Andy says, interesting picks, Dylan, and then also posted the Dynasty League in the Discord. Thank you for that reminder, Andy. We have a free link in the description. The link is free and the experience is free. Go in the Discord. It's got Discord right next to it, not very hard to find, and you get exclusive access to the content on this channel. I throw polls out there. What should I do next? I let you guys dictate it, kind of how I'm letting you do in the comments right now. We've got a trade forum questionnaire type of thing where if you want to throw in any questions about should this trade go through, we've got a great community, tight-knit community. Make sure you go in and join that for sure. Saying I'd go Amon-Ra. Oh, in the other North. That is good to note. So, Dylan, those are your 2 picks. I shall go with... I'm going to go Zay Flowers first. Zay Flowers, not the best season in the world. A little over 850 yards in that ballpark. Few touchdowns. We do have somebody in Mark Andrews who goes down and kind of presents an opportunity for someone like Isaiah Likely. But Zay Flowers is the best wide receiver one that we have seen in Baltimore since Marquise or Hollywood Brown. It's been a while. It's been a few years. The reason I also bring this up is I do believe Lamar Jackson is somebody who's going to be passing the ball more. You have kind of what Dylan was saying at the very beginning of this live stream. Somebody in Lamar Jackson who's going to take on that Russell Wilson style of play. Now, Lamar is quicker and more elusive and more versatile than Wilson. But in order to extend somebody's career who is elusive like that, who can run the football, who is super athletic, guess what you got to do? You got to drop back and pass the ball more. You have to preserve your body more. And I think the fact that a first-rounder in Zay Flowers had the year that he had in one of the most run-heavy teams in the league, and you're kind of going to see that anywhere in the AFC North, shows there's a lot of potential there. Now, my second player, you're going to think this is kind of interesting. It's probably not the first, second, or 20th name you would come up with out of this division. I think there's an interesting case to be made for Chase Brown. You mentioned that Joe Mixon, 28 years old. If we are looking far future, if you are a fantasy sweat and you're like, I want to make sure I got someone who's got a real shot in the next couple of years, Chase Brown, stud out of Illinois, Big Ten school, not the best in the world. They were ranked for a little bit last year, I believe, in his senior year. But what we do have is somebody with a premier opportunity to kind of take over for Joe Mixon. So, I don't know. Thoughts on those 2?
I thought you were going to swerve it and go Jake Browning, like going to a different team, which I completely forgot about that. But long term, I love the Bengals running back choice because Bengals love to keep running backs, especially in their system.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Mixon was brought into the system and he kind of developed under Giovanni Bernard. And then he took over that role. And we're kind of seeing that same thing here, that progression of slowly integrating the younger back into the role of what Mixon is taking on right now. I like that. And Zay Flowers. Interesting that you went with a receiver from the Ravens, knowing that they're such a run-heavy team. But if you're going to choose a receiver, why not choose the best receiver on the team?
Right. And I think in general, you kind of brought up that point before. As we start to conclude this live stream, 1 of 8, where we break down essentially every position and give them a grade from every division. NFC North will be next per Andy's request. And Andy, the Discord link should be in the description, so not in like the live chat. Make sure you take a look at that. If that's not there, I will make sure to throw it in here very soon. I think the main thing is, what's up?
I will say that Andy is alluding to one of my picks for breakout stars. If I had to choose one person for next week, it would have been Amon-Ra.
Okay, that's fair. I'm looking forward to that.
So I'll have to do some digging for a different player now. I've got a few that are cooking, but Amon-Ra, I have had Amon-Ra for 3 years of fantasy, and he's been a stud every year.
That's a consistent one, too. And you kind of talked about this in the first time you jumped on the live stream, actually a week ago, where you said, hey, I think this guy's got a fire under him after not being named to the Pro Bowl. He definitely strikes me as a chip on your shoulder type of figure. Looks like he took that personally. Now that team is angry and in the final 8. Would love to see a Packers-Lions NFC Championship, by the way. We'll close with something a little fun, and then we'll get out of here. Your Super Bowl matchup and winner. Who do you have?
Super Bowl matchup and winner. Oh, man. Oh, let's go Bills. I think the Bills will get revenge on KC this week. So let's go Bills, and by gosh, I can't tell if I'm biased, but the Pack is back, baby.
Bills
and then I think Packers win it. Packers all the way.
See that reporter who said, you heard it from a fan right here after he said Pack is back? That was something. That was pretty funny. I'm going to go... Stick to my guns and go Bills 49ers. I do think the Packers give the 49ers a very good fight. The spread's like 9 points right now. I would not doubt it. This is kind of looking like 2010/11, where that team grabbed the last seed and looked pretty promising there. So, folks, you heard it here first. We let you control our destiny, our fate, our future streams, the content on our channel. Discord link is in the description if you want to click on that. Otherwise, I will throw it in the community tab in case you guys are having any issues, because it looks like Andy's saying it's going just to the general chat, so I'll check the back end of that. I dropped the link in the live chat on my personal channel as well, so we'll see if that works. Otherwise, I will just come up with a community Ravens-Packers Super Bowl. I like it. I'll come up with a community post, and we'll throw the Discord in there. Purpose of the Discord, so you guys can have a free, kind of exclusive, but not really exclusive because anyone can join it, experience. I'll ask you ideas on future videos, ideas on certain topics we can touch on. We can go over any potential trades for your dynasty. Anything like that, really. But that is Dylan. I'm Corey. We will see you next week. That is our review, our grades one more time of the Ravens. Then we got the Browns, got the Steelers, and the Bengals. We're grading them by position. The NFC North is next. Dylan, thanks for coming on as always, man.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun, and I can't wait to absolutely crap on the Bears next week.
All right. Well, that's going to be fun. I'm going to have to do what I can to give the Packers their flowers, but still kind of show – I'll try not to show my fandom, but if you get me going, we might have to go there. So that's Dylan. I'm Corey. This is Armchair Fantasy Football. Make sure you leave a like. Make sure you subscribe. If you are into fantasy, we're covering Dynasty. We are ranking positions for every team, going through all 32. We will see you in the next one. Have a wonderful evening, folks.